Big Polly's World of Sports Sims proudly presents the recap show, a look at the 11 of the 16 games that were untelevised this week in week 15 of the Hometown Football League as we near the end of season number 1. This is Big Polly coming to you. There are the standings. We will go over the league leaders, show you the latest playoff projections. We have one team in the playoffs now and 3 eliminated, and we will go over that in a moment. We'll start out by going through the statistical leaders, he says. Not prepared to. I always get tongue-tied with the word statistics. Drew Brees leading at 107.7 in terms of passing rating. Jim Brown, your leading rusher for Cleveland at 1599. Julio Jones, 78 catches. Brown of Cleveland, Jim Brown also leading in the non-kicking scoring category, 128 points. So that would be 21 touchdowns and a 2-point conversion. Amongst kickers, Zerline of the St. Louis Maroons at 109. I'm looking ahead to Julio Jones here, who's still way ahead in passing yards at 1397 over Torrey Holt's 962 for the Maroons. Kevin Green still leading in sacks with 10. Dave Brown has now forged ahead over Wilson of St. Louis in interceptions with 5. Zach Thomas of Miami still leading in terms of the most tackles at 116 over Luke Kuechly's 105. The best offenses in the league: Cleveland, San Francisco, Baltimore, Las Vegas, and Indianapolis. The top 5 defenses are now Seattle, Washington, San Francisco, New England, and Philadelphia. And in the power ratings, the top 5, according to the Dave Koch Sports Action PC 2020 engine: San Francisco number 1, Baltimore number 2, Green Bay number 3, Cleveland number 4, New York number 5. And we'll be seeing all these teams in action next week in the televised games. So we'll look at the greater detail at the passing ratings. You see there Manning, Milt Plum, who has been a reserve quarterback for Cleveland and well known for being an accurate passer. Everett of Los Angeles. Warner of St. Louis, your top 5. Warner leading in passing yards at 39-31. Manning with 35 touchdowns. Everett now the leader in the fewest percentage of passes intercepted at 0.3. That takes us to rushing. We'll look at the top 5 there. It's Brown, Peyton, Emmitt Smith, LaShawn McCoy, and Jamal Charles. We have right now 24 running backs that have now gone over 1,000 yards. Walter Payton leading in attempts, 281. Jim Brown leading in rush yards per rush average at 6.3, as I mangle that, and Jim Brown leading in rushing touchdowns at 20. In terms of receiving, Julio Jones, as we were mentioning earlier, Larry Sanders, Marshall Faulk, Zach Ertz of Las Vegas, and William Andrews of Atlanta, your top 5. Julio Jones way ahead in yards gained catching at 1397. He's 435 points clear of Torrey Holt. Lenny Moore leading in the per catch average, 20.1. Graham of New Orleans, Smith of Jacksonville leading in touchdowns with 10. Defensively, we were telling you that Dave Brown leads in interceptions, Kevin Green in sacks with 10, Zach Thomas in tackles 116. Hurries, short of Carolina, leading at 20. Malloy of New England leading in deflections at 26. Stuffs, Aaron Donald of LA at 17. Bruiser Kennard and Warren Moon leading in fumble recoveries at 5 each. Bruiser Kennard playing tackle and defensive tackle for the Ironmen of Vegas. Forced fumbles, Phillips of San Diego at 9, and opponent's completion percentage throwing to the various defensive backs. Johnson leading at 28.9. Lester Hayes, his teammate, right behind him at 31.6. Special teams wise, Jenkins of Arizona leading on the kick returns at 28.4 a return. Kern still leading in gross and net punting, 47.0 and 42.7 respectively. Humphreys of Tampa Bay still leading in punt return yardage for punt return 13.3. We went over the scoring of kickers, Zerline leading at 109. Ryan Lindell leading in field goal percentage, 86.4. Return yardage, Dante Hall, 1561. Zerline has also made 25 field goals, and Morton Anderson and Rob Baronis lead in field goals over 50 yards with 6 each. And with that, I show you the latest in the playoff projections. We have one team in that is denoted by the asterisk next to New York. The Giants are the only team in with 3 weeks to play, and I have erred up here. I'm going to fix that real quick. This is projections after week 14, not week 13. 13 was last week, and I forgot to catch it when I was remaking the slide, so my apologies. In the North, Green Bay, Baltimore are your leaders. Cleveland, Minnesota, your wild cards. Everybody's still in the hunt. Chicago leading the way. But Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and Detroit could all be eliminated depending on who wins and who loses. If Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and Detroit lose, they are eliminated. But Minnesota could also win and knock them all out, or Cleveland, depending on what happens. In the East, the Giants have clinched a playoff berth. They will be either the number 1 or number 2 seed in the East on the basis of their win last week over New England. Washington will be number 2 or number 1, the way things look now, but they're in a dogfight with St. Louis. Washington leading St. Louis in the division record, that's why they are ahead. And New England at 7-6, leading up the rear. Everybody's still in the chase, even Miami, because they're only 2 games behind New England at 5-8. And Dallas, Buffalo, and Philadelphia all in the hunt. Although, let me see here, if New England won and they could knock out Philadelphia, if Philadelphia lost, or if Miami lost, the teams that lose could be eliminated. But that hasn't happened yet. In the South, it's a little more clear. Carolina retook the lead actually they still have the league in the Upper South. They've never lost it at 7-6. New Orleans beat Houston, so they own the head-to-head sweep at 6-7. Houston has dropped to 4th, and Indianapolis moves to 3rd place on the basis of point differential. They are at minus 46, and Houston at minus 52. Atlanta and Tennessee still alive. Jacksonville and Tampa Bay each have been eliminated from playoff competition. In the West, things got a little more interesting with Kansas City beating San Francisco, but San Francisco is still your division leader. LA is number 2. If they win this week and Las Vegas loses, Los Angeles will be the division champions because they'd be 3 up with 2 to play. Kansas City is 3rd. On the basis of, let me just double check that, folks, while I have it up. Seattle has moved into 4th. We will mention that in the Upper West. They are each 4-1, so it goes to point differential, and San Francisco has a 143 net point lead over Kansas City that has 46. So San Francisco not likely to lose that net points advantage. Seattle has moved into 4th at 7-6. Las Vegas has moved in behind Seattle. Denver is now 6th. San Diego 7th. And Arizona has been eliminated. So they get a copy of the home game and finish. They will finish out of the money and not make the playoffs. We'll go ahead and show you the 5 games we're going to play this week ahead. And here they are. It's Las Vegas and Washington, Baltimore and New England, New York and Green Bay, 2 10-3 teams. I aired in the last episode saying there were just 3 teams at 10-3. New York is also 10-3, so you got a 4-way tie for the best record right now in the HTFL. Minnesota and San Francisco will be the Thursday game. St. Louis and Cleveland, the quote-unquote Monday night game, will be the Friday game. So we're going to start playing the 11 games that did not make the cut and show them to you now, the line scores and whatnot. We start with Los Angeles and Detroit. Can Los Angeles get to 10 wins? Barely. 23-20 the final. And it went to overtime, as I'm seeing 6 numbers here in the box score and not 5. Your leading passer was Everett of Los Angeles, 21 to 37, 280 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 sack given up. The leading rusher was Eric Dickerson, 89 yards. 218 yards receiving for Tom Fears on 14 catches. Wow, he had a big day. And we'll get to the scoring summary here in a moment. Come back here. I wasn't done with you yet. And the leading tackler was Larry of Detroit at 10. So that's going to knock Detroit out of the playoffs, or a possibility of the playoffs. And you see the scoring summary here. Murray got a field goal, 2 touchdowns, Everett to Fears, and then Younger. Stafford came back, a long throw to Calvin Johnson, and it was 14-10 at the half. Everett to Fears for 38 out. That was in the extra point, no good, so it was 20-10. Murray kicked a field goal, and then with 1:31 left, Stafford threw to Billy Sims from 5 yards out to tie the game with 20. Went to overtime. Barr connecting from 49 yards out, 9:47 into the overtime, and Los Angeles prevails. So if Las Vegas loses, well, Los Angeles will take the division, and Las Vegas will be the Monday game that we play, or actually we'll be playing that in just a little bit if you're seeing the recap show on time. And the team stats, 388 for LA, 345 for Detroit. Los Angeles. I always get Las Vegas and Los Angeles mixed up. LA 1 for 2 in the red zone. Detroit converted a touchdown, their only trip to the red zone. We had 17 penalties in the game. LA had 73 plays to go with the 37-23. They held the ball. And Detroit had it for 58 plays. Again, we'll look at the scoring summary. 9:47. So actually, they went 5:13 into overtime, and my apologies for messing that up. And there you go. The MVP of the game at Ford Field, of course, had to be Tom Fears, and it was. So Los Angeles 23 and Detroit 20. So they move now to 10-4, and they will have to hope that Las Vegas loses to Washington to clinch the lower West title this week. So that takes us to Carolina and Buffalo for our second stop. The winner was Buffalo, 34-17. So Carolina falls to 7-7 on the year. This was played at Buffalo at Ralph Wilson Stadium, 18 degrees. For a Florida boy. It was a close game. It was 17-17 early in the third when Cam Newton threw a 27-yarder to Steve Smith, and then Buffalo poured it on. Kelly with 2 touchdown passes to Bass and Molds. Lindell kicked the field goal. 34-17 was your final. Buffalo had 526 yards and scored every trip to the red zone. Carolina 394. Buffalo held the ball 38-51. 14 penalties in the game. Buffalo ran 77 plays to Carolina's 45. Kelly, a great day, 30 for 40, 401 yards, 3 touchdowns, and he was sacked twice. Thurman Thomas led the way, 102 yards on 26 carries. The leading pass grabber was Thomas of Buffalo. He had 9 catches, 84 yards, so he had 186 total. Bass of Buffalo had 119 yards. For Buffalo, Olsen, 5 for 106 to lead Carolina. Leading tackler was Kuechly and Beeson for Carolina. They each had 11. So the final there, 34-17. And that means Carolina is now 7-7, and we're going to have a big old mess determining who wins the Southern Conference, with Carolina now the only team at 500 at the moment. But we have other teams that are going to play. And speaking of the Southern Conference, we have Tennessee, Cincinnati up next. Your winner there was Tennessee, 31-20, which I think eliminates Cincinnati. We will look into that in greater detail in just a little bit. 31-20, your final. It was Paul Brown Stadium, a 31-degree day, a strong wind. Roll was the MVP of the game. And it was 31-20. McNair threw 3 touchdown passes. Palmer threw a couple. One to Chris Collinsworth, one to Corey Dillon. But it looked like Tennessee had the lead most of the way. In fact, once they scored the second time at 14-7, they did not relinquish the lead at all. Team stats. We have 349 yards for Tennessee, 353 for Cincinnati. Tennessee perfect in the red zone, 5 for 5, 4 touchdowns, a field goal. Cincinnati was perfect, but they only visited the red zone once. 36-21 is how long Tennessee had the ball, 23-39 for Tennessee. There are 13 penalties in the game. Tennessee ran 64 plays, and Cincinnati ran 63. Player stats, that's what I'm looking for. That's the ticket. McNair, 17 of 26, 187 yards. He threw 3 touchdowns, was not sacked. Johnson had a great day for Tennessee, 32 carries, a $161. We had Wycheck, 10 catches, 129. Collinsworth caught 5 passes for 109 for Cincinnati. The leading tackler was Perfect of Cincinnati with 10. So Cincinnati, I believe, has been eliminated from the playoffs. They lose 31-20 to Tennessee. Our next game, that's why I said Philadelphia, we have Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Your winner there in this Battle of the Keystone State was Philadelphia, 31-17. 29 in Column at Heinz Field in Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh trailed early, and they got it even on a Johnson 9-yard run, John Henry Johnson, to tie at 10-10. Philadelphia went ahead on a McNabb to Pihos pass. Pittsburgh tied it back, Roethlisberger to Brown, and then Wilbert Montgomery and LaShawn McCoy with touchdowns to make it 31-17. Should keep Philadelphia in the playoff hunt and may eliminate Pittsburgh. As well, Philadelphia, 286 yards, 292 for Pittsburgh. Each team perfect in the red zone. Philadelphia 4 for 4, 3 touchdowns and a field goal, and Pittsburgh 2 for 2. There were 15 penalties in the game. Time of possession was about even. Philadelphia 59 plays, and Pittsburgh ran 65. The better passer on the day at Heinz Field on a blustery 29-degree day was Donovan McNabb at 76.2, but he only went 11 for 24, 127 yards, 1 touchdown. McCoy, 132 yards rushing. And the leading pass grabber was Miller, 8 for 72. Leading tackler of the game was a whole bunch of players at 7. We had Vincent and Dawkins at 7 tackles for Philly. For Pittsburgh, it was Polamalu, Woodson, and Ham, all with 7. So your final 31-17. And now that puts Pittsburgh out of the running, I do believe, in the Northern Conference at 5-9. Even if Minnesota and Cleveland each lost, they'd be 8-6, and all these teams would be 3-out. So Detroit, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh are now the 4th, 5th, and 6th teams to be eliminated from the playoffs. That brings us to Jacksonville and Atlanta. Atlanta still have a chance to make the playoffs at 5-8. And Jacksonville wins and gets off the schneid after a long losing streak. They win 27-17, which may be a death blow to Atlanta's chances of making the playoffs. But we will see about that. Both teams trading scores. It was 14-10 nearing the half. Hollis hit a field goal, making it 17-10. Ryan to White tied at 17 all. Brunell to Lewis, 24-17 Jacksonville. And then Hollis with the field goal, 4:42 left in the game. And that did it for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Of course, Jacksonville last week lost to Tampa Bay. So they have rebounded nicely and defeated Atlanta. 314 yards for Jacksonville. Atlanta had 395. Each team perfect in the red zone. Dead solid perfect, because every time they got to the red zone, they scored a touchdown. We had 23 penalties in the game, including 15 for Atlanta. Jacksonville held the ball 37-17. They ran 68 plays. Atlanta ran 58. And Brunell outdid Ryan. He was 24 of 33, 203 yards and a touchdown. Leading rusher William Andrews at 90 yards on 18 carries. We had Lewis for Jacksonville 8 for 103, but Rison had 139 on 5 catches. Those were the only two who were 100 yards receiving. The leading tackler was Brooking of Atlanta at 10. So Atlanta loses 27-17. And believe it or not, they could still make the playoffs. They're 5-9. And even if the 6 and 7 teams go 7 and 7, they still have a mathematical chance. So Las Vegas and Washington will be the first game we do this week. That'll be coming up on Monday. Baltimore and New England will be the second game. That'll be Tuesday. So let's take a look at an Arizona-Tampa Bay game. Tampa Bay win 2 in a row. How about, yes, 24-0. Break up the Buccaneers. They have won 2 in a row. DeBerg threw 2 touchdowns to Evans and Carrier. Houston with a field goal. And Aqib Talib with a 42-yard interception return to salt the game for the Bucs. Team stats. Arizona was held to 130 yards. They did not enter the red zone once. Tampa Bay was perfect. 375, 2 trips to the red zone, a touchdown and a field goal. They held the ball 32-45, 11 penalties in the game. Tampa Bay ran 65 plays. Arizona ran 54. DeBerg, 18 of 28, 252, 1 interception, 2 touchdowns. The leading rusher was Mike Allstott, 16 for 73. The leading pass grabber was Johnson for Arizona, 5 catches for 13 yards. But Allstott had 5 for 27, but leading in yardage was Carrier, 4 for 99. The leading... Well, come back here. Come back here. I wasn't done with you yet. There we go. And the leading tackler was Derek Brooks for Tampa Bay at 10. So Tampa Bay now at 2-12, and Arizona falls 3-11. But both teams will be watching the playoffs from the safety of their own homes. Miami and Houston is our next stop. See what happens there. Houston needing a win. They are at 6-7, along with New Orleans. And New Orleans would own the tiebreaker based on a head-to-head record, and in a shootout, Houston has won 45-42, which pretty much sinks the Miami Dolphins from playoff contention. Unless New England were to lose and fall to 7-7, at which point Buffalo may enter the fray as a wild card candidate. Let's take a look at the stats. Here's the scoring summary, and this was a wild game. It went to overtime, by the way. Carpenter hit a field goal from 36 out to tie it 42-all. With 15 seconds left in regulation, Al Del Greco won at 4-11 into the overtime. The Oilers winning 45-42, and you could see there we had a lot of scoring. And with that, we had 1,127 yards of total offense. Both teams perfect in the red zone. Miami made 6 trips to the red zone. 7 penalties. Not a lot of room for penalties when you got that much yardage. 65 plays run by Miami and 79 ran by Houston. And Houston out first down to Miami 33-26. I imagine the player stats are going to be extensive. Marino, 430 yards. 28 of 39, 430, 4 touchdowns and a sack given up. Warren Moon was not bad. 29 of 49 for 468, and he had a 99.7 rating. The leading rusher was Earl Campbell, 17 for 95. We had 2 Oilers go over 100 yards receiving. Daniels, 10 catches, 146. Hopkins, 7 for $161. Clayton for Miami had 3 catches, 112 yards. And the leading tackler was Zach Thomas, 12, so he'll extend his tackling lead in the HTFL. And Miami still alive, barely, I would think, but that could all change by the end of the week. 45-42, Houston has defeated Miami. New York and Green Bay we do Wednesday night, so we'll do Seattle and Dallas. Seattle has come into Cowboys Stadium on a hot streak. They have won 5 in a row, but they cannot make it 6 as Dallas moves up 26-7. They are now 8-5, and now they are in a 3-way tie with St. Louis and Washington. We'll look at the box score here. Indoors at Cowboys Stadium, and this was pretty much all Dallas from the get-go. They got out to a 13-0 lead. Wilson threw a touchdown to Jackson, cut it to 13-7, and that was the last play of the first half, so that must have been a Hail Mary. And then Dallas with 13 unanswered wins at 26-7. Dallas dominant, 499 yards, 7 trips to the red zone, 5 scores. Seattle held to 149 yards, a total offense, only 7 penalties. Dallas' time of possession was 41-35. If you hold the ball that long, you're going to win a game. Seattle only ran 36 plays. Dallas ran 86 plays. And look at the first down differential, 29 for Dallas, 4 for Seattle. Romo was 26 of 39 for 354, an interception, 2 touchdowns. Leading rusher was Smith of Dallas at 98 yards. Emmitt Smith also had the most catches at 94 yards on 9 catches. And the leading tackler was, we had 2 at 10 for Seattle. Wagner and Robinson each had 10 tackles. So Seattle now in a 3-way tie with St. Louis and Washington at 8. Well, actually, Dallas is 8-6. St. Louis and Washington are 8-5, so they're only a half game back. And depending on what New England does, if New England loses to Baltimore on Tuesday night, in our Tuesday night game, New England could be behind Dallas in the wild card chase. So that was 26-7. New Orleans and Chicago will be next. Both teams 6-7, and New Orleans has won 21-14. So 3 teams have now in the Southern Conference have now gone to 500. Carolina, Houston, and New Orleans all tied 7-7. But let's take a look at the particulars of the New Orleans-Chicago game. It was 21-14, 32 degrees at Soldier Field. Well, you expect it to be cold in September. And let's see here. It was 21-7 after Drew Brees threw a 62-yarder to Wes Chandler. Orton to Graham from 26 out with under a minute to go in the game. Cut it close, but it was 21-14, New Orleans prevailing. They had 309 yards, went 2 of 3 in the red zone. Chicago was perfect in the red zone, but they only made 1 trip, 293. Their total yardage. 13 penalties in the game combined. New Orleans 54 plays. And Chicago ran 57. So Brees was the better thrower, 14 of 19, 172, 2 touchdowns, so he didn't have to throw much. Ricky Williams outdid Walter Payton, 24 carries, 117. We had Graham and Forte each with 5 catches. Graham 5 of 62, Forte 5 of 46. But the leading receiving yardage maker was Chandler, 2 for 69. The leading tackler was Singletary of Chicago with 10. Chicago is now 6-8, and they can still get to 8-8. And if Minnesota and Cleveland both win, Chicago will be eliminated from playoff contention. That brings us to Indianapolis and Denver. And this is the next to last game we will be running. Your winner is Denver, 31-24. They bounce back and move to 8-6. And Indianapolis 6-8. But the way the Southern Conference is, everybody is still alive. Falk, with the exception of Jacksonville and Tampa Bay, It was 14-7 and then 14-14 at the half as both teams traded touchdowns. Humphrey from 11 out made it 17-14. I'm sorry, it was 14-10. 14-10 at the half. Indianapolis leading. Humphrey from 11 yards out made it 17-14. And it was a tie game when Vanderjagt hit a field goal. Sanders a 34-yard fumble recovery. Bob Sanders. Elway to Smith, Elway to Sharp, and that was that. The last touchdown coming at a minute 8 left in the game. 420 even for Denver. Four scores on 5 trips to the red zone. Indianapolis was perfect, but they were only in the red zone twice. 12 penalties in the game, 71 plays called by Indianapolis to Denver's 60. The leading passer was Elway, 21 of 30, 294. By a yard, Humphrey was the leading rusher, 14 carries and 70 yards. Shannon Sharp of Denver, 8 catches, 140. He led in catches and yardage. The leading tackler was Gradishar of Denver with 13. So Denver 31-24. They win. Kansas City and San Diego are our last stop on the recap show tour. Your winner? San Diego, 48-24. So Kansas City, after a big win over San Francisco, took the starch out of them, and San Diego has bounced back with a 48-24 win. And we'll see what's going on here. Kansas City got off to a good start, Dawson to Bow, but then San Diego got hot, 21 unanswered. Dawson to McClinton. McClinton with another long touchdown catch, but it was 24-14 at the half when Kading hit a field goal. Rivers to Young made it 31-14, and Dante Hall got hot, a 101-yard kick return to make it 31-21. San Diego, a low 4-yard run, made it 38. Tynes got it to 38-24. And then Kading with another field goal, and Tomlinson from 4 yards out with 5:58 left in the fourth, and it was 48-24. San Diego over Kansas City. San Diego had 498 in total yardage. They were 5 and 6 in the red zone. KC went 1 for 1 in the red zone, but they only got a field goal and got 282. San Diego held the ball 42 minutes and 42 seconds, which probably explains why they won. 14 penalties in the game. San Diego had 74 plays, and Kansas City only ran 38. 33-13 was the first down margin, so San Diego did a lot right in this game. Rivers, 17 of 25, 240 yards. Tomlinson, a beast, had a big day, 29 catches, 29 carries, 187 yards. Young had the most catches, 6 for 79, but it was McClinton, 2 catches for 100 yards. And we've mentioned in previous HTFL broadcasts that he is a beast out of the backfield catching passes. Lanier, the most tackles on the day at 11. So those are all the games to be recapped. We will have Minnesota, San Francisco on Thursday, and we will have St. Louis and Cleveland on Friday. Let's look at the standings and see how that all breaks down. We'll start in the East. You got Dallas now moving up and creeping up on New England. They will be a half game ahead of New England, but if New England wins, they own the tiebreaker on a head-to-head win over Dallas, so they would still be in 4th position at the very least. Washington will be our first game this week against Vegas. In the South, we have 3 teams at 7 and 7, and New Orleans and Carolina. I don't believe they played each other this year. They did not, so it would go on points, and right now, Carolina is -5, but New Orleans is better. They are plus 30, and Houston would be -52. Then you would have Indianapolis at 6 and 8, and Tennessee and Atlanta could still catch Indianapolis, even though they're 5 and 9. In the North, Green Bay is 10 and 3, Buffalo is 9 and 4, Cleveland 8 and 5, and Minnesota 8-5. Chicago would be eliminated if Minnesota and Cleveland both won and got to 9-5. Otherwise, Chicago's still in the hunt. But now Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Cincinnati are all bye-bye. They cannot catch up. They will all not make the playoffs. In the West, Los Angeles wins the division if Las Vegas loses in that first game with Washington. Kansas City could still very much win the Upper West, even though they lost big today in San Diego. They're 10-4. San Francisco 10-3. That is not over by a long shot. And you got Denver up a half game on Vegas right now for the last wild card at 8-6. Vegas is 7-6, and Seattle is at 7-7. So if Vegas loses, they would lose their shot. Well, it wasn't theirs to begin with. It was Seattle that was in the fourth position. But if Denver holds on, Denver and Vegas did not play each other. So let's look at that real fast. If it came down to a tie between Denver and Las Vegas, right now Denver is -10 and Vegas is +23. So if Las Vegas won, they would get the wild card actually for and be the number 4 seed. But that's if it ended right now. It does not end now. It ends in 2 weeks. So we will be back with 5 games to do this week in the HTFL, beginning at 7:30. All the games start at 7:30, by the way, with Las Vegas and Washington. So if you're seeing this prior to 7:30 on Monday, stick around because we'll have that game for you. This has been Big Paulie coming to you. We wish you well, and we'll give you one last look at the games on the slate this week. Godspeed and God bless. Hope you all had a good Thanksgiving weekend and early Yuletide cheer for you all as we approach the holiday season. We will do it all again real soon if I can get the words out correctly. Bye bye for now, everybody.